next up, we are pleased to have Representative Paul Boyer to introduce our second Lit Talk, which focuses on policy changes that impact early literacy in Arizona. Representative Boyer is the chair of the House Education Committee, a member of the House Rules and House Judiciary and Public Safety Committees. He co-sponsored legislation last year that helped bring enhancements to the Move On When Reading third grade retention statutes. So please help me join in welcoming Representative Paul Boyer.
Well, good afternoon. That was lame. Let's try that again. Good afternoon. Thank you. That's much better. Well, I'm pleased to be introducing this next Lit Talk. As chair of the House Education Committee, I'm committed to helping our state increase and improve our early language and literacy outcomes for the children of Arizona. As most of you know, less than half of our state's third grade students are reading proficiently. As a legislator, I can tell you there's no easy solution to the problem of this magnitude. I also know how important it is for us as a policy body to work with the Arizona State Board of Education, the Arizona Department of Education, and partners like Read on Arizona, First Things First, and others to build a comprehensive approach to grade level reading, an approach that starts early and meets Arizona's students where they are with effective supports and the instruction they need to learn, advance, and succeed. So you'll see and hear in this next Lit Talk that this past legislative session included a lot of policy developments that impact early education. Dr. Carol Schmidt, Executive Director of the Arizona State Board of Education, and Sean Ross, Director of English Language Arts and Humanities for the Arizona Department of Education, will be co-presenting and will cover some of the highlights from the legislative session and help you understand how that impacts your work in classrooms and sites working directly with students. Please give me a warm round of applause for Dr. Carol Schmidt and Sean Ross.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Representative Boyer, where's the bow tie?
The wife likes the tie.
I want to acknowledge Representative Boyer and Senator Allen. We're so lucky to have such wonderful chairs of the Education Committee, and they've been a joy to work with over the last year. The last legislative session had some critical changes on and enhancements for literacy, so I want to walk through a few of those and talk about 4 of them. And the governor talked a little bit about this one already, was the early literacy grants. The board yesterday at a 12-hour meeting approved the policy or the process for applying for the early literacy grants. These will provide an additional $20 million in funding for schools with free and reduced lunch status at 90% or above that they can use on K-3 literacy efforts or for full day K. So we want to thank the legislature and the governor for support of that. Literacy also plays an important role in the A to F school accountability. That's been the A to F plan has been in development over the last year. The board adopted that in April. Some of the key measures involved in the K-8 accountability plan focus on literacy, both with performance on AZ merit for growth and proficiency in English language arts scores, as well as the acceleration readiness measure. This is a new indicator in K-8 accountability, and some critical issues related to literacy are available for schools to earn points, thereby decreasing the amount of students who are minimally proficient in the 3rd grade on English language arts by decreasing chronic absenteeism. We know that's a critical key towards literacy and success in school. Also, the inclusion of special ed students within the classroom. These are different ways that schools can earn points in connection with the K-8 acceleration readiness measure. The board is looking to set cut scores at the September 28th board meeting. And then the next steps is the board will engage in an annual review to bring enhancements to accountability and also to look to expand the measures within the K-8 acceleration readiness. Another key area with literacy that was championed by Representative Norgard dealt with the development and publication of a Dyslexia Handbook, which the board adopted also at its meeting yesterday. And dyslexia impacts 1 out of 5 students in Arizona, and this is a critical resource that was put together by the Department of Education in collaboration with a number of different stakeholders. And it's a very, very impressive tool, and I want to thank the superintendent and her staff. This will be a great resource for Arizona, and we're very excited about the publication of that. Another key development in literacy over the last year was about this time last summer, the board was faced with a very difficult decision regarding retention of third graders after the school year had ended. Because scores came out later that year. And so in response to this, the board formed an ad hoc committee to look at the Move On and Reading provisions and see if there could be enhancements to the process. So 11 members were selected, and they represent stakeholders from the field who are involved in literacy efforts every day. And they made recommendations, and some of these recommendations involved enhancements to the Move On When Reading literacy plans that are submitted every year, and Sean Ross will drill down on those. But a couple of key things that we were getting asked consistently is, what is the $40 million being spent on every year, and are those practices effective? And those were two critical things that weren't being captured in literacy plans every year. There wasn't a budget that was submitted, and there wasn't an evaluation about what's really working. So these are very important things to collect information on, that then the state can issue a report and share those best practices on how to improve literacy. So that's one of the big changes that came from the ad hoc committee, and there's some other specific ones that Sean will talk about in a few minutes. The other thing too that's different is with that literacy bill for changes to Move On When Reading, you will get your test scores now before the end of the school year. That's a big change for the teachers. And I think the other thing about these changes in terms of finding out what works is it reflects what the governor said earlier about measuring the right things and sharing those best practices. So we know it's going to be a little bit more work for the teachers or the people submitting the plans and for the department in reviewing them, but we really think that this is going to be a needle changer, that we can find out what's working in Arizona and help support those best practices. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean to drill down on some more of the changes.
Hello. Hi, I'm Sean Ross. I'm the K-12 Director of English Language Arts and Humanities at the Arizona Department of Education. In my role as the ELA Director, I'm also the Director for Move On When Reading. And it's pretty interesting that the story of my life has brought me to this point professionally, because I have a pretty interesting relationship with literacy. When I was 12 years old, my mother was hit by a car while crossing the street, and she was actually dead for 3 minutes and in a coma for 3 weeks. And the resulting surgeries and the resulting injuries, when she came out of her coma, she was actually reduced to childhood. And so my sisters and I had to really rally as a family, and we had to talk about, what do we do, how do we move forward? And we made the decision as a family that we were going to raise our mother, that we were going to help her back to adulthood and back to herself. So my sisters took on the tasks of life skills, sort of daily living, and I nominated myself at 12 years old to teach my mom to read and write. And so I would come home from school every day and on the weekends, and I would spend time with her reading, and we would work on the alphabet. We eventually got to CVC, consonant, vowel, consonant words, and then simple decodable books. And this may seem like a really strange role for a 12-year-old, but even at that young age, I knew internally that if she was going to regain access to adulthood, if she was going to find herself back to herself, she needed to be able to read and write. And so it's this belief in the power of literacy that's the key to unlocking a full and a rich adult life that brought me to this point in my career. And so I'm going to talk to you today about the Move On When Reading legislation. And the legislation The focus on it is often in that move on part, but really the spirit of the legislation is to promote early identification and targeted intervention for students. So they are reading at grade level at or by the end of 3rd grade. And this really is the spirit of the legislation. It's the spirit and the focus of the majority of our work dealing with move on when reading. And each year, Carol talked about this, and there have been some changes to these. Each year, every school with K-3 students submits a literacy plan to the Department of Education that my colleague, Destiny Chiarello, and I review. We are your Move On When Reading team, all 2 of us, and we are happy to help. And so every school submits a K-3 literacy plan, and these plans are really designed to help schools have a systemic approach to literacy, have a focused approach to literacy that they can share with their district as a whole, that they can share with us as a state, and that they can actually share with parents so that they know how they're approaching this really vital skill. And the literacy plans that come in each year have some really key information. So they have the core reading program that the school is using to teach all of its students. It includes the literacy assessments, their universal screeners, their diagnostics, their progress monitors that they're using to help identify their struggling readers, to help gauge where each student is as a reader. It includes their literacy data, which they actually will write narratives for this year to help reflect upon how successful their practices have been and maybe some things they can do to improve. Their intervention strategies, and then the professional development that they offer to teachers, the rich professional development to help them help their students on their road to literacy. Now, no approach to literacy would be complete without parental involvement. We all know that. We know that the parents are a key part of the teaching team. And so the literacy plans also include a requirement for communication home with parents. So there are actually 2 letters required for the literacy plans. One is a general letter about Move On When Reading. And there's a second letter that's required, and this is for students who have been identified as struggling readers. So if a school identifies a student as a struggling reader, they are required to notify the parent with the specific area of struggle for that student, the supports that student is receiving at the school, and then I think this is probably most important, the things that the parents can do at home to help support that student's literacy so that they become part of the teaching team, because we know that it's only going to succeed if it's all of us together. Once a school has identified a struggling reader, they implement certain intervention strategies. And these strategies are targeted by the literacy data for the student's specific area of struggle. And these can include small group instruction, reading interventions before, during, or after school, computer-based support, and summer school. Now, again, Move On When Reading does have the move on piece, right? It's an important part for us to acknowledge. And even with early identification and even with targeted intervention for every student, some students do need more time to hone their reading skills. And so a student who fails to meet the Move On When Reading cut score on the reading portion of AZ Merit is to be retained unless he falls into one of 4 exemptions that I'll talk about in just a moment. Now, on average, this impacts about 3% of the state. And when you remove students from the total number of exemptions, which again I'll talk about in just a sec, it's about 200 kids per year. Now, that's 200 more than any of us are satisfied with. I totally know that. I was in the classroom for 15 years. I'm power to my brothers and sisters. And so, so we know this is 200, too many. But you have to think about, of the thousands of K-3 students in the state, the number, all of them, each of them are receiving this targeted and specific support. Their teachers are taking the time and the care to gauge where they are as readers right at the start of the school year, and then to see what they need, what specific skills they need, where their specific deficiencies may lie, where their strengths may lie, and to support them individually on their path to literacy. So there are 4 exemptions to retention. So if a student fails to meet the cut score on the reading portion of AZ Merit, they're not automatically retained if they are an ELL student with less than 2 years of English instruction, if it's a student diagnosed with a reading impairment, including dyslexia, a student in the process of referral for or who has an IEP, and a student with assessment data to prove that she is making sufficient progress towards reading. So this is new, actually. This is one of the things that came out of that K-3 Ad Hoc Literacy Committee that Dr. Schmidt talked about. And this was a new change for this year. We kind of call it the one bad day exemption. Teachers are very concerned that they have these students who have data from the entire year that shows that they're reading and they're making progress towards reading, and then they just have a really bad day on AZ Merit, and they're like, what about that kid? here you go. This is the exemption. And actually, in my mind, this really captures the spirit of what that ad hoc K-3 committee did. They really took at heart what is best for kids. They made those recommendations, and the legislature adopted them, which is fantastic. So again, even though it's called Move On When Reading, the purpose is really, really that focus on gathering specific data on students as readers so that we can provide specific and targeted interventions for them so that they can get started on their path to literacy, get started on their lives as readers and writers. Now, I talked to you about this for a second. If you have any questions about Move On When Reading, if you have any concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Again, there's just two of us, Destiny Shirello, who's also in the audience. We are a small but very mighty team. We move mountains on a daily basis, and we're pretty proud of ourselves for that. And we are here to support you. We absolutely understand that these changes are new and they're daunting and they can be a bit confusing, and we will help you kind of make your way through them. Now, before I go, I want to point something out. So this is actually a picture of my mother and my daughter. So my mom made a really remarkable recovery. We're just unbelievably fortunate. And one of the best parts of my life is that on a daily basis, I get to watch her read to my daughter the way that she once read to me and the way I once read to her. And it's this really powerful reminder of literacy, the ability to read and write as one of those keys to adulthood, as one of the keys to overcoming even seemingly insurmountable obstacles. And I knew that at 12, and I know that at 42. Don't want to admit that too readily. I know that today, and I know that every one of you in the room knows that as well. So thank you for everything that you do. Please, again, don't hesitate to reach out. We are here to help. We are here to help you because you help our kids. So thank you very much.